Hello people, it's me again. I'm just trying to finish off my painting, oil painting of the river frome. And you get a few minutes sometimes here and there to do it. So I'm just using a cadmium yellow mixed with titanium white and a tiny little bit of green, just to get this background in, just to give it a tiny bit more distance. Way off, and there's a little field way back. There are some little hedges. That's my cat scratching the table. What are you doing, cat? He's a good little boy. He's only young. He's not even a year old. I think he's about 7 months. And there's some fields right in the distance too. Like, got these trees here, this tree line which goes down and go back that way. And they sort of curve around this field edge, out round to here. And it splits off into another field over there, and then another one over there, and another one over there. And there's one which is between the trees, and it's just sticking out slightly a bit here. Just trying to put a tiny bit of highlight in there. Just to bring out, see if we give it a little bit more distance. So you can see little tiny little bits here and there sticking through. Only slightly little glimpse of light. It's like poking through the trees. And this field curves up a bit because it goes up this big hill. So before you get all this copse, because a lot of fields have in the corners on the hills and that a lot of trees just bunched on top. We call it copse of trees, and I love that. You got some way off in the distance. I think I need to make those trees way off in the distance here, make them a bit more sort of bluey, sort of like a bit of French ultramarine, and put make it more like a slight bluey green. It's not turquoise, but it's just, I think it's more green than blue, but it's got a hint and you can see it. It does have a tiny hint, but I might actually make it just very thin, transparent blue actually, and put that on there, just slightly over the top. Right, let's get a bit of blue. What I'm going to do is just a tiny bit of French ultramarine. Clean the brush off each time. make sure it stays wet with a tiny bit of white spirit in it. And just slightly touch the paint. So you just got a tiny little dab, and you got a very thin, you can't see it, but on the end, there's a very, very fine bit of blue just there, and it's watered down with white spirit. Let's see if this works. If it doesn't, you can always just wipe it off or let it dry. Just very, very slightly touch it. There's a couple of little big trees at the back. Just make it a bit more blue. That's a bit better, so it looks a bit more blue. A bit more distance. There's some of the trees a bit nearer. These are some just going over the back actually. I think I'll just wipe it slightly over that too. Because there's a tree line just going through there. I might have to go a tiny bit darker, mix it a bit more with a bit more. Well, it's sap green really I'm using, so I'm going to mix that sap green with that French ultramarine, make it just give it a bit more body, make it a bit more thicker that way. And then put a tiny bit of white spirit, because it's only a tiny little bit we're using for a tiny area. So I use this. So there I've got a tiny bit on there, French ultramarine, sap green and white spirit. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't matter. You can let it dry and just go over it, or so it's not worth rubbing it down when you've got quite a bit of work around it. That's not dark enough. See, that's what you do it, is you build it up. Start off very thin. Sit back, have a look, and see whether it's dark enough or it looks like what you need, but it's not. It needs it a bit more darker now, so I'm going to go a tiny bit more blue, a bit more sap green, but not so much white spirit, so it makes it so thin. Just a very, very slight bit. But you've got a bit more sap green, a bit more French ultramarine to go with it. So it makes it a bit more dense. I hope you can see it, because painting is just an experiment anyway. You just, I'm teaching myself as I go every time. That's a bit better, it's a bit darker. Just dab it here and there and try to make just little trees, just little dobs. You got to join them together slightly, so it's giving that horizon. Very carefully join them up. That's better. Now you can see the horizon a bit more. Might make this one a bit more thicker, so I don't feel that. You probably have got a feel that steep, but I might have to make a tiny bit more darker just on that bit there. But sit back. It looks alright. You probably heard before, painting is an illusion on paper. So if illusion's the right word. Maybe. No, it's probably not illusion then. A bit more darker. Is that even more better? Try and make it a bit more realistic, but maybe a bit too bright. It still goes up through there. Try and do it in between these leaves. Realize it goes up through there. And it carries on up through to the top of that hill. And it's going to change colour because it gets a bit darker. It's getting there. A tiny bit more French ultramarine, make it a bit darker. Still with the sap green, and it's still wet with white spirit, so it's still thin. Still trying to make these shapes of trees. So you don't make all different shapes and sizes up, and so you're not sticking to a certain pattern at all. They're all going to have different shapes, aren't they? Sizes and slightly different colours. I might have to put some more slight shade of browns in there too. Got to define that a bit more. A bit more sap green on this one. Let's see. Where's my stick outline? One more stick. Which I used to use when I was songwriting. Here we go. It does go uphill slightly there. A bit more. It's a bit more of a clump of trees just there. Definitely need to make that a bit darker. So a bit more French ultramarine. Just dabbing it in. Trying to get the tree shape. I'm walking from a photo anyway, so. Because you're letting there's going to be some light coming through. It's not going to be totally blocked out, because you've got on top of hills, you see like trees. I might get a tiny bit more brown in it actually. I'm making a brown up of red and yellow, blue, so, and a tiny little dab of black. Make a nice good yellow out of that. Nice yellow, I like that yellow. It's cadmium yellow. I've got lemon yellow too, but just a tiny bit of black. More. It's really going to be like a muddy colour. A bit more green in it. So I need to make shadow up. Here we go. Now, So you've got a row of trees come up here. I'm going to have a bit more brown in there. It's like I've done it like a muddy greeny brown. So there's like a bit of sap green in there. Makes it get a bit darker here. What I'm doing is just dabbing it in. A bit more sap green in with that. I guess to make it a bit more. Try and pick out little trees and doing their shadow. We'll be doing highlights on top. Getting the pointed tree up there too. It's only just like when you get a tree line up in the skyline and a bright bit, it just make it a bit more hazier anyway. So you got to make it a bit more fuzzy. It's not that defined. It's just background anyway. Let's try and make some of these a bit more, the shadow. You got a shadow underneath the trees, got to make it a bit more sharper under those bits actually. Try and make them stand out a bit more. I will start painting from scratch once I finish this one and go from the very basics. I don't always paint in the background or nothing like that, like a dark colour first. I use a white canvas. I mean, it's each their own, innit? I think it depends how people are taught how they like to paint their paintings. So, I mean, I've done it a couple of times where I tried it out, and I don't think it makes really that much difference, really. So I usually find that by the time I finished painting in a painting, I start out by doing the background first and doing these under shading and everything else. What do they call it? And I started painting normally, Oh, shaking the camera phone a bit. I find that I've half painted the painting nearly, or quarter, well, not half, usually about a quarter. I usually sort of like quarter way through a painting, and I've realised I've taken so much more time, like, I can't remember the words, what they call it now. I'm a bit forgetful today. No, we'll have days like it. Let's try and get some more shadows in here, because there's a dark layer of trees coming up through this bit, and then it gets a bit lighter. I mean, it's a different type of tree, because I think it's like from like the ancient woodlands where that you can't farm those part of the hills because they're so high, so steep that you couldn't get tractors and horses up it. It'd be like cruel to the horses and cruel to the tractors. Well, not cruel to tractors, but you know what I mean. It's probably burn their clutches out trying to get it up and down there. So I think it's just been left. So it's like just natural woodland that's been there for thousands of years, because you've got all the different types of natural tree where like modern forests are made up and they're just usually just pine trees. Because ancient forests have got all different types, as you know. I will get them a bit more defined, but I'm just trying to get the shadow in a bit more. And then when I do the highlights, then you'll see a bit more of the individual trees. If I can do, I'll do one now, just to show you. It's still wet, but that's all right, because whenever you use a lighter colour on top, I shall use a cadmium yellow with sap green. Just makes it, just get it a bit lighter. I just like to do it like start halfway on the mixed colour. So now, obviously the light is all coming down more like this way at an angle, because you've got a big shadow going under here. So if I start from here, just very using the very point of the paintbrush, if I dab in these colours, these like halfway the colours between dark and light, before I darken them and lighten them, so I'll put them halfway down the tree, because then you can see it will light up a bit and it'll start to give it a bit more body, make it look a bit more thicker. Now I'm going to darken it a bit more sap green, which is, I mean, I do usually make colours up with just blue and yellow, but this sap green is so very close to most leaves in colour. So now I'm going to use this sap green on that, a bit more shadow at the bottom. Now I clean that off, and then I'm going to put a highlight on the top, which is like, I'm just going to use a very tiny bit of cadmium yellow, a very small bit of sap green. It makes it lighter, and because the sunlight's on it, it's like, I think it depends what the weather's like, and whether you get more of a yellow green or a white green. Well, it's more of a grey green, but it depends on the weather. What sort of atmosphere there is. I using this very, very tiny, using just the very slight little hairs on the end. It's barely touching it. I don't know if you can see it, but I can't zoom in really, but I'm just going around the edge. Just a bit more. I'll use a tiny bit coming through. Do another one just next to it. It's picking up that darker paint and all. And that blends in. That gives it a bit more highlight on there. You probably can't see it very well. I can. Right, I've got to go now anyway, because that's 25 minutes. I hope, I don't know, I'll just show you something and you learn something, or I'm going to, like I say, once I finish this painting, I'm going to do one from scratch. I'll paint anything, portraits and animals and landscapes and some vehicles and everything. I do it in watercolours too. So I thought, well, you have to teach yourself to do everything so you can cover everything. So if somebody goes along, oh, you know, they want a painting, and you go, oh, I can't do that because I just do this, or just do portraits, or just do landscapes. Then you lose out on that money. So I do take commissions on, and you know, my paintings are for sale. So I don't know. There you go. That'll do for now, and I will do another video in a couple of more days. I'll do a lot more to this. It's going to take maybe another 5 videos to finish this. And take care out there. Be safe, and hopefully subscribe when it and give me views and give me likes, or however you do it. You know how to do it. I'll still set myself up. Thank you and goodbye.